Okay, so today, so on Tuesday we talked about, okay, so prior to Tuesday we were talking about companies, that have some product, what price are they going to charge for it, right? Then on Tuesday we talked about, do you want to have a product in the first place? Do you want to create the product? And now we're going to talk about, what, now that you've decided to create a product, what type of a product do you want to create, right? That is, a monopolist's choices of things other than price, the characteristics of the product. And just as the monopoly problem helped us think about redistribution, right? So we used like a model that was supposed to, be of the behavior of a private company to think about how the government wants to choose its policies. Similarly, we can use a theory of the design of non-price characteristics by a monopolist to think about how the government wants to design social programs. And we're going to look at this from a variety of perspectives. We'll start by just thinking about what are the goals that a company has and the tools that it has to design its products. We'll then talk about Spence's analysis of a quality choosing monopoly and the difference between marginal and average consumers that he emphasizes. We'll then talk about Hotelling's spatial model of competition, and we'll apply that to political and newspaper competition. And then about platforms, which are cases where the things that make the product more valuable are who uses it. So for example, if you think about a nightclub, what makes it fun to go to a nightclub is the booze they serve and how pretty it is, but probably more importantly, who shows up, right? And then we'll talk about how the value of different consumers can be heterogeneous, and we'll apply that to thinking about insurance, loans, as well as to the platform contracts. Okay, so when firms design their products, they have a couple, they have to think about what their goals are in designing the product. So one goal is to keep costs low and prices high, right? So to the extent that they can, supplying some levels of quality or some services is costlier than others, they're going to want to avoid the costly ones and go for the less costly ones. To the extent that, say, changing how much they charge for various services can raise the amount of revenue they bring in, they're going to want to do that. So they are also going to want to try to bring in as many consumers as possible, because the more consumers they have, the more money they can make off the consumers. So they want to do things that are going to be attractive to consumers so that they can try to get them to purchase their products, right? And only the consumers who are actually thinking about purchasing the product, but who haven't for sure decided that they want to purchase the product are going to get attention, right? So if one consumer is definitely going to buy the product, you don't care about pleasing them. And you don't care about pleasing someone who's definitely not going to buy the product. The people you care about are people who are sort of thinking about making a purchase, right? And this is really the same logic as price discrimination, right? You want to target the people who are marginal to buying the product rather than the people who are definitely going to buy it or definitely not going to buy it. And client services are usually about this, right? Salespeople go out and they're supposed to identify people who maybe they can make a sale to and then do a lot to cater to those people, right? Finally, firms often want to try to attract the most valuable and repel the most costly consumers. So sometimes different consumers have different direct value to a firm. So if I'm offering insurance coverage, I really don't want to insure people who are going to get really sick or who live in an earthquake-prone area, right? I also don't want to make a loan to someone who's going to go bankrupt and not going to be able to repay me. And when I'm a company, I want to design a workplace like Google to attract the most creative, productive people, or Goldman Sachs to attract the people who are like most slavishly obsessed with being successful in an investment bank and are willing to work insanely long hours in order to achieve that goal, right? Similarly, consumers can have indirect value in attracting other consumers. So, for example, you might bring a really famous rock singer to try to bring a lot of beautiful women into a club, because those beautiful women will attract a lot of men who will pay a lot of money, right? So or offer free drinks to women for similar reasons. Okay, so the tools or instruments that firms have to try to achieve these goals are price. They can adjust the price of their product. They can also do things that are not just their basic price, but like, how much they charge for extra services, how much add-ons they do. We talked about that in the price discrimination lecture, so that's less going to be the focus today. But the logic today is going to be very similar to then, which is that you're going to try to target the value to the marginal rather than to the inframarginal consumers, which is exactly what you're doing with price discrimination. What other ways you can achieve that goal is to adjust the range of products that you offer that allow you to segment the market and appeal to different consumers. That's not going to be the primary thing we'll talk about today, but the logic is going to be very similar. More of our focus is going to be on firms adjusting things like quality or how easy it is to use a product. What's the right trade-off between charging a lower price and charging a higher price but investing to make the product higher quality, right? What's the right niche of the market to try to target a product? Should you try to appeal to lots of people, or should you try to appeal to a small group that really values it? And this is often called the trade-off between being on the long tail or on the fat tail. So the fat tail is like the few products on the internet that like tons of people buy, like Angry Birds, right? And then, but there's also like the long tail on the internet, the little indie bands that like use the internet to reach like a few people who are willing to pay a lot for their music. Right? Advertising and marketing to consumers, placement of products, these are other aspects of the design of products. And also, you may try to attract the right group of consumers, as I mentioned, as a way to target the product. So consumers, the value brought by consumers is both a goal and a tool that you can use to affect the other consumers. Okay, so a typical way we can divide up tools or instruments is into ones that are vertical and ones that are horizontal. So vertical instruments are ones that all consumers agree are either good or bad. The simplest example of this is price. Everyone wants a lower price, right? But quality of products, things that we would just call overall quality, more generally are going to be vertical characteristics. So like the speed of an internet connection. Everyone would like a faster internet connection. Everyone would like a more comprehensive insurance coverage. And while consumers may differ in terms of how much they value such things, they all see that it's a positive value. On the other hand, horizontal characteristics are ones that some consumers view as good or some consumers view as bad. Usually the way this happens is that each consumer has like what their favorite thing would be along this dimension. And the further you are away from it, the less happy the consumer is. You'll see a simple model of this below, but typical examples are like colors. Some consumers like pink, some consumers like blue, etc. Flavors. Everyone might have an ideal point in terms of how spicy they want it to be. If you go above that, they're not happy. If you go below that, they're not happy. Right? Styles, or the political bias of a newspaper, are examples of horizontal characteristics. But sometimes things are sort of a little bit of each of these. So some consumers might view it as negative, but the overwhelming majority of consumers view the thing as positive. And the key thing that distinguishes between, horizontal, vertical, or diagonal is really not the inherent nature of the thing itself. It's not just that having more speed is inherently a vertical characteristic, but rather that everybody views it as being beneficial. Whereas the spiciness, some people view as being beneficial, some people view as being harmful. So the key to what it means to be a vertical or horizontal characteristic is how consumers differ. It's all about the heterogeneity of the consumers rather than the nature of the instrument inherently itself, right? It's about the fact that consumers view horizontal things as more differently than they view vertical things. It makes one horizontal, one vertical. And so Spence famously offered a model that was all about consumer heterogeneity and how this interacted with the design of the choice of the quality of a product. And so this model really highlights the importance of the heterogeneity. So suppose there's a bunch of different consumers, and each is either going to buy a product or not buy the product. And each consumer gets a utility from buying the product, which depends on some characteristic of the product. It could be its spiciness, it could be its political bias, it could be its overall quality, and what type of consumer it is. So the type of consumer is just a bunch of stuff describing them. You know, maybe their whole genetic code, or whatever. Their income, where they live, their gender, etc. And we're going to assume that the types are distributed in some space, and we're not going to be super specific about that. The key mathematical tool we're going to use, and I'm going to try to emphasize exactly how you use it as we go through this, is Leibniz's rule. That is, whenever anything changes, we're going to have some integral, and when you change something, it's going to affect who's consuming, and it's going to affect how well the people who are currently consuming are doing. Those are going to be the two effects. One is an effect around the boundary, who is or is not purchasing, and one is an effect on the interior. What do those people who are still consuming get or harmed? Okay, so what are these boundaries, and what's the set of people who consume? Well, people are going to purchase the product if their utility is greater than the price, right? And so the set of people who are consuming are the set of all people types, theta, such that the utility, given the characteristic, and their type is greater than the price. And so the number of people participating is the integral over all people who have a utility greater than the price of the number of people like that there are, d theta. Okay. So now we're going to use Leibniz's rule for the first time. What happens when we use Leibniz's rule? Well, we have the effect on the interior. There's no dependence on price here, right? Nothing inside depends on price, so we can ignore that. So the only effect is on the boundary. What is the boundary? It's this condition here. How does increasing the price affect the boundary? Well, it just raises the left-hand side of this thing by 1 unit everywhere, right? And so Leibniz's rule says we take the integral along the boundary of -1, because this is going to reduce the number of people who are participating. It's raising the price, and only people who have utility above the price participate. So we're going to have the integral around the boundary. What's the boundary? Who are the set of people who are marginal or indifferent between consuming and not consuming? It's the people whose utility is exactly equal to the price, right? They're the boundary of the set of people who have utility above the price. So we get the integral along the boundary, the set of all people who have utility exactly equal to price, of the number of people like that times -1. And the second, so there's two keys in this lecture. One is Leibniz's rule, and the second one is anytime we have some big, ugly, awful expression, give it some simple, intuitive name. So here is some big, ugly integral. But what is this? It's just how many people there are on the boundary, right? So we're going to call it M. And that's going to be the density of marginal consumers. Yeah, Eric.
Why is it negative again?
Because when you raise the price, that reduces the number of people who are right? In some sense, this condition is U minus P is greater than 0. So it would be the effect of raising P would be -1. Okay. So the marginal users are those that have U equals P, and we're going to call